and welcome to another episode of the Airport Communities Podcast. My name is J.C. Harris, and I am your host for today. Friends, there's just so much going on. Get me a towel, because my head is swimming. We're putting together a sort of year-end summary for next week, and for now, we're just going to crack on with today's topic. But before going further, I'm going to go off script here a minute and mention the passing of Arlene Bronzaft last month. The pioneer, I think it's fair to say, in getting noise talked about more in terms of public health. She will be greatly missed, and we'll have a link to some of her work in the show notes. It did take far too long to get health on the table in a sincere way, because historically, whenever anyone complains about the airport, they're really talking about either making the airplanes go somewhere else or getting a check so they can go somewhere else, if you know what I'm saying. One way or another, the question has usually been about real estate, specifically the individual property owner's real estate. There have been a few moments that have been pivotal in our thinking over the years, and one of them was 2018. At the time, Sea-Tac had an airport committee, Burien had an airport committee. It seemed like everybody had an airport committee, because back then everyone thought that the SAMP was going to be decided imminently. Who knew it would be another 7 years? Anyway, at one of those Sea-Tac committee meetings, their then mayor made a motion, actually two motions. The first was to change the mission statement for their airport committee towards not just discussing the harms of the airport, but perhaps also the benefits. And the second was to dissolve the committee entirely. They ended up dissolving it because they felt it had served its purpose. But when she made that first motion, she said she wanted to change the mission statement because she liked the airport. She said explicitly, "It keeps my taxes low." Now, in the same week, we attended a Burien airport committee. Their mayor, also a member of their airport committee at the time, said he also had concerns about only discussing the harms of the airport. The airport and airport-related industries not only create jobs for the workers in his business, he is a construction contractor, but also because, in his view, the airport was the last affordable area in King County. Now, Sea-Tac's former mayor was quite conservative. Probably still is quite conservative. She wore a MAGA hat with pride. Burien Mayor Jimmy Mata could be said to be at the other end of the political spectrum. Two mayors with, I think it's fair to say, kind of opposite politics, saying exactly the same thing: affordable homes. A hot topic right now, no? Now, at the time, Esty and I had just started to dig into the concept of property values. How much have they been affected by the airport over the years? Historically, we know that property had been central to the opposition of both the second runway and the third runway. As we said in an earlier episode, in 1977, people next to the western noise boundary were incensed learning that immediately following the Sea-Tac Communities Plan, Boeing was talking about moving their headquarters over there. The moment that news story broke, even just talking about it, their property values, again, plummeted. See, just when the market had priced their homes according to the concept of open space next to the airport, now the port and county were talking about a possible corporate office park. And so these residents were furious. The fascinating thing was that many people at the time, their primary concern was not that the area would become noisier. We need to stress that. Their primary concern was that it would again reduce their property values regardless of how the area were used. For many Americans, our home isn't just a place to live. It's our single biggest investment. If your home isn't just a place to live, but also your largest source of potential wealth building, of course you're going to be incensed at any possible threat. And everyone likes to have it both ways, of course. High property values, low taxes. But especially in the Pacific Northwest, we've been uniquely successful. In fact, we're in the top 5 of all America in increases in property values over time. That's happened for any number of reasons, and not the least of which is that, not being judgy here, but we've had some of the most restrictive zoning in all of America, limiting the number of homes that can be built. Anyway, the people along the western side of what was then the second runway did not appreciate having their property values potentially diminished. Just page after page of testimonials and comparatives with other properties from both realtors and homeowners. And that's been a primary source of our analyses of how these things play out. As we said in the Westside Hilltop Survival Committee episode, they did have sort of a Pyrrhic victory. Boeing did not move their HQ there. Instead, the area remained in play, and then we got the third runway. Yay! Now, longtime followers of STNI know that 5-6 years ago, we started doing a property tax appeal cookbook. It was a set of instructions you could use along the same lines as those people back in the day to get the assessor to lower your property taxes based on airport impacts. Now, 13 of you, bless your hearts, took our experiment seriously, went through this rather onerous process, and did obtain meaningful reductions. Well done, you. And then the county stopped. We now realize that the initial group was successful because, 1, 2, 3, even 13 people are just kind of a novelty. But after 13, well, it starts to become a pattern, and they weren't having it. Now, we arranged a conversation with the tax assessor. Very gracious. He explained candidly the concept of the airport discount. And here is a portion of what he said. The mayors of Sea-Tac and Burien were quite correct. Your home is worth less because of the airport. But, there wasn't a period on that sentence. There was a comma. The end of that sentence was, so what? Which was an excellent response. So what? According to the county, the market has correctly lowered the value of your home, and thus the amount you pay in property taxes. You are already getting your compensation, your airport discount. You're not entitled to more. The market has already done that for you. That's why people currently move near the airport. Affordability. People who move here make the rational economic decision to live in a place that trades dollars for noise and invisible pollution, or maybe better schools, or any number of other less desirable features. For better or worse, that is what is driving the demographic shifts we are seeing. Maybe you just are thrilled to have a house. Or maybe, regardless of the long-term health impacts, you don't find the current noise levels bothersome, at least initially. And some people who move here now know the schools are not what they used to be, or any number of what used to be important issues or amenities. More and more, the decision to relocate around the airport is based on the airport discount, the affordability metric, not based on proximity to water or any other desirable amenities. It's affordability, number one, with a bullet. Now, the budgetary problems of cities are invisible. Nobody looks at a city's balance sheet before deciding to relocate. You just assume the city is paying its bills and will offer various services. If the city isn't offering amenities like in other cities, it's probably because of, poor management or a bad city council or something like that. And the people who have run our cities over the past few decades have also never fully internalized what these demographic shifts have meant either. Basically, everyone bought into this argument that a rising tide lifts all boats. You hear our cities mentioned as being potential. Somehow, the airport growth would sooner or later promote economic development, and eventually it would trickle down and improve all our surrounding municipalities. Set aside the overall economic benefits to King County or the state or the planet or even individual jobs. There's that word, individual, again. The intrinsic argument of the airport has been that it will uplift the surrounding communities. The one time that was questioned was with the Sea-Tac Communities Plan from 1973 to 1976. But with the debacle of the West Side Hilltop Survival Committee, that all started falling apart. Since then, the notion has been, as the airport grows, organically, all by itself, with no agreements or compensation, the surrounding communities will derive tremendous benefits from that growth, organically. That is not true. It's why the city of Sea-Tac worked so diligently over the decades to develop its own ILA and compensatory agreements, and it's unfortunate that other surrounding communities bought into that notion of organic uplift. It's not true. And the reason it's not true is because of the airport discount. The affordability for the individual sucks the lifeblood out of the city in which we live. Now let's go back to some of the systematic incentives here. The Part 150 program, as we've said, is voluntary. It was set up as a consolation prize after legislative changes in the 1980s, which limited compensation only to individuals. Federal law put the kibosh on pretty much all individual lawsuits, but also constrained cities from engaging in legal action to obtain any kind of overall compensation. That's an important detail. The compensation, such as it is based on individual land parcels. In the most extreme cases, DNL 75, your property is either bought out and cleared from any kind of public use via eminent domain, or you'd be bought out and then your property would be resold at a profit by the port. Or you were offered a one-time sound insulation and no buyout. So the best case scenario is that the port engages in the same basic thing as a property tax appeal. They get 3 comparables and then they'd make you an offer, and if it looked like a good faith offer within certain guidelines, that was it. And it was based on current market rate. As we saw in the West Side Hilltop Survival Committee episode, one of the most infuriating aspects of airport expansions is that your property value drops the moment the port announces an expansion, and thus, any offer they might give you also dropped. And that's one of the most bitter arguments, even from people who got buyouts. My offer should be based on the property value before you announce this harebrained new airport expansion. In fact, it should be based on the same quality of life in the more expensive community. Yeah, it didn't work because the tax assessor looks at what reality is, where that property is now. People here in Washington constantly talk about the 1% cap on property tax increases. And it's true that our taxes overall are high because property values, as we said in the opening, are so off the charts. But if you're an airport city, you don't get that windfall. Most cities get a very small chunk of your overall property taxes. So they've got it even worse. We don't build enough houses, and then the airport takes property off the market. You take out these homes, you take out the property tax, and you replace it with a bunch of tax-exempt property run by an entity that can repurpose it for profit-making adventures like the Des Moines Creek Business Park or NERA. Best case, homes are sound insulated, but even then, the airport discount further reduces the tax base. All the screaming comes from property owners who feel like they didn't get their check or they didn't get a large enough check. Fair enough. But the people who ran our cities bought into trickle-down economics, that thing that hollows out all factory towns. Want to see an affordable community? Visit Detroit, which used to be one of the 2-3 wealthiest areas per capita in the United States. That's what happens when you allow any industry to expand with no limit and no appropriate compensation. Airport communities are factory communities. The incentive structure is inherently perverse. The aggrieved homeowner either gets a property buyout or doesn't and is bitter. When they move, new people come in and they get affordability. The loser is the city that has to make up the loss in value. But if you have any intention of staying here, you are also your city. You have hopes that your city will be able to provide more money for parks, for schools, for crime prevention, for roads, all of the stuff that makes a city desirable and have a bright future. We call it sustainability. But over time, the airport discount encourages people to move simply for affordability, because the amenities you'd like to have, that you should expect, are in the more expensive parts of the county. It's not just the noise, it's the lack of funding for those municipal services. Traditionally, people have been hair on fire about getting a check. Again, their check. You still have some people who say that everybody within 6, even 10 miles north and south should get a check and declare the entire swath a clear zone. Thought experiment. Where would these people go? If you have a home that you think is perfectly fine except for the noise, where would you get an equivalent value? How big of a check would you need to get something as amenable? Multiply that by all of those properties 6 miles north and south. There aren't enough zeros to cover it. Another of the most ridiculous suggestions we've heard, sorry, but some ideas are good and some not, has been more than one attempt by state legislators to simply refund to individuals their portion of the property tax levy paid to the Port of Seattle. Now, The average amount paid by a homeowner to the port is about $80 a year. You'd be taking $80 from the port and giving you that money, which doesn't even pay for, 2 people to attend a Seahawks game. 1 game. It gets big points for populist flair, but it doesn't solve anything. However, if you took all those $80 from each household in the airport communities and gave that money, which normally goes to the state, back to the cities, you'd be energizing each city with millions of dollars instantly. It would be transformational for your city. To be clear, we're not saying that's the solution. It's just funny to us that people repeatedly propose the idea of individual rebates for such a small amount. Yet nobody, until we came along, proposed the notion of a city benefit. Even today, you look at the port's grant programs, none of them are great, but the most generous offerings are for small nonprofits. Cities are usually limited to programs amounting to about $1 per person. So for a city like Des Moines, it'll be $30,000. And even then with a large matching requirement. Woohoo! But the fact is, cities will always be an order of magnitude better at addressing long-term community goals because they have the expertise, the staff, and even more importantly, because they persist. If you want better parks, environment, schools, police, roads, basically all the good amenities that make a city livable and sustainable, the city will always be the best choice to do the heavy lifting. We know this may be a tough pill to swallow, but if you live around an airport, it's not just about your parcel. It's about your local government. The tax assessor is essentially correct. You're already getting a significant airport discount in terms of lower individual taxes. Yes, your taxes are crazy high, but that's because you chose to live in one of the most beautiful, most overpriced markets on the planet. You pay a tremendous premium. Blame Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. Don't blame STNI. There are plenty of very quiet, very nice, modestly priced homes in Arkansas. But here's what always could have happened. Programs by airport operators like the Port of Seattle, King County, from the state, they all recognize they are obtaining profound benefits at our expense. The economic development writ large is no joke. It really is billions of dollars in benefit. The joke has always been the notion that it happens, that economic benefit, in the areas most directly affected by the negative impacts, you and me. If you look at all of the cities cheering about the SAMP, they're the mayors of cities like Auburn, Redmond, and even North Bend. Hello, SR 509. That's the whole point, to provide better connectivity to logistics and warehouses and all the places that get the gold mine while we continue to get the shaft. What never got codified into Part 150 intentionally is recognition that the entity that really takes it in the neck is your city, the one entity that makes your community livable and sustainable for the long term. It's not that these things are impossible. It's just that we've never thought about it in the right way. We bought into all that trickle-down jazz so hard, we never acknowledged what was really going on, year after year and decade after decade. As airport communities, we've never stopped to think hard enough about what the airport discount really means, not only for us as individuals, but just as importantly, for our cities. We're all in this together.